What if the harder you try, the worse your results actually get? What if the reason you feel exhausted, stuck, or overwhelmed is not because you are doing too little, but because you are doing too much? What if the single most powerful shift you could make in your life is not adding more effort, more planning, or more control, but something completely opposite to everything you have been taught? There is an ancient principle, over 2,500 years old, that modern neuroscience, sports psychology, and flow research are now beginning to validate. It comes from one of the most translated books in all of human history, and the core idea is so simple, so counterintuitive, and so profound that most people spend their entire lives completely missing it. That principle is called Wu Wei. And by the end of this video, you will never look at effort, action, or success the same way again. Let us go back to somewhere around the 5th or 6th century before the Common Era. Ancient China. A philosopher, possibly a keeper of imperial archives, sits down and writes what will become one of the most influential texts ever composed. His name, according to tradition, is Lao Tzu, which translates roughly as the Old Master. Whether Lao Tzu was a single historical person, a composite figure, or a literary legend remains one of philosophy's most fascinating open questions. But what he left behind is undeniable. The text is called the Tao Te Ching. It is only about 5,000 Chinese characters long, roughly the length of a short essay. And yet this slim, cryptic, poetic work has been translated into more languages than almost any other book in history, second only to the Bible. Scholars from Stanford University, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have all written extensively on its depth and influence. It is the foundational text of Taoism, one of the three great pillars of Chinese thought, alongside Confucianism and Buddhism. The very first line of the Tao Te Ching delivers a warning. It says, in essence, that the Tao which can be described in words is not the true Tao. The name that can be spoken is not the eternal name. Right from the beginning, Lao Tzu is telling us something unusual. This philosophy is not a set of rules or instructions. It is an invitation into a way of being that goes beyond intellectual understanding. So what is the Tao? The word literally means the way. It refers to the underlying order and flow of the universe. It is the force behind the turning of the seasons, the growth of a tree, the rhythm of breathing, the movement of rivers. The Tao is not a god in the personal sense. It is more like the deep current beneath all existence, the invisible intelligence that holds everything together without effort, without announcement, and without needing to be recognized. Taoist philosophy asks a simple but radical question. What if you stopped fighting that current and started moving with it instead? This is where Wu Wei comes in. The concept is often translated as non-action, but that translation is misleading if you take it literally. Wu Wei does not mean doing nothing. It does not mean being passive, lazy, or indifferent. A more accurate translation might be effortless action, or acting in accordance with the natural flow of things, or knowing when to act and when to step back. Think about water. Lao Tzu returns to water again and again throughout the Tao Te Ching, and for good reason. Water is perhaps the most perfect illustration of Wu Wei in the physical world. Water does not struggle. It does not force its way through obstacles. It finds the path of least resistance, moves around what it cannot move through, and over time it shapes even the hardest stone. The Grand Canyon was not carved by force. It was carved by patient, consistent, effortless flow. Water seeks the lowest places, the humble spaces that other things ignore. And yet, as Lao Tzu observes, nothing in the world is more powerful than water for wearing down the hard and rigid. The supreme good, he writes, is like water, which benefits all living things without trying to compete or dominate. That is a radical image. Benefit without competition, power without aggression, influence without force. Now here is where this ancient philosophy connects directly to modern science. And this connection is not a stretch. It is surprisingly precise. In 1975, Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi introduced the world to a concept he called flow. Csikszentmihalyi had spent years studying people who seemed to perform at their absolute best during certain activities: painters, athletes, chess players, surgeons, musicians. He noticed that during peak performance, all of them described a remarkably similar inner experience. Time seemed to slow down or disappear. Self-consciousness vanished. Their movements felt automatic, natural, and effortless. They were completely absorbed in the present moment, not thinking about results, not worrying about failure, just doing. Csikszentmihalyi called this the flow state. Athletes often call it being in the zone. And the characteristics he documented: absorption, effortlessness, loss of self-consciousness, heightened perception, natural timing, map almost perfectly onto what Lao Tzu was describing 2,500 years earlier with Wu Wei. The neuroscience behind this is equally fascinating. During a flow state, research shows that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring, judgment, and deliberate planning, actually reduces its activity. This is called transient hypofrontality, a term coined by neuroscientist Arne Dietrich. In other words, the part of you that second guesses, overthinks, and tries to force results literally quiets down. And when it does, the more instinctual, pattern-recognizing, intuitive parts of your brain take over. You become faster, smoother, more creative, and more accurate, not because you are trying harder, but because you stopped interfering with yourself. This is Wu Wei in neurological terms. Basketball legend Bill Russell, who won 11 NBA championships with the Boston Celtics, described certain games where something extraordinary happened. During those moments, he said, the game felt different. His perception expanded. He could sense how the next play was going to develop before it unfolded. He was not thinking about strategy. He was simply present, moving, responding in flow. The harder he analyzed, the more that feeling disappeared. The more he let go and trusted his instincts, the more naturally everything came together. Gymnasts, surgeons, jazz musicians, master chess players, and elite military pilots all describe variations of the same experience. The zone is not a place you force yourself into. It is a place you allow yourself to enter by releasing the grip of conscious striving. One of the most beautiful illustrations of Wu Wei in Taoist literature comes from a 2nd century text called the Zhuangzi, named after its author Zhuangzi, who is considered the second great founding voice of Taoism after Lao Tzu. In this text, there is a story about a cook named Ting. Lord Hui Wang watches cook Ting butcher an entire ox and is stunned by the elegance of it. The cook moves with what appears to be impossible grace. His knife glides through the animal without resistance, guided purely by feel and instinct. He does not hack or force. He finds the natural spaces, the hollows, the joints, and the knife moves through them almost as if the animal is opening itself up for him. When the Lord compliments his skill, the cook says something surprising. He says he is not operating through skill. He is following the way. He stopped seeing the whole ox years ago. Now he works from spirit, not from eyes. He goes along with the natural structure of the thing he is working with, and then comes the detail that makes the story unforgettable. Good cooks, he says, replace their knives every year because they cut. Average cooks replace them every month because they hack. He has been using the same knife for 19 years because he never forces. He finds the way through and the knife stays sharp. This story is not really about cooking. It is about any skill, any task, any life. The people who burn out, break down, and run dry are the ones who hack. The people who sustain excellence over decades are the ones who flow. Now consider how radically this challenges the dominant Western model of success. We are raised on a very specific story about achievement. Work harder, push further, hustle more, force results, never quit. The culture of ambition, productivity optimization, and relentless striving is everywhere. And to be clear, effort matters. Discipline matters, showing up matters, But there is a crucial difference between disciplined effort and anxious striving, between focused work and desperate forcing, between acting with clarity and acting from fear. Taoist philosophy makes a distinction that modern psychology also recognizes. There is a spectrum of engagement. On one end is anxiety, which comes from tasks that are too difficult, too uncertain, or too threatening. On the other end is boredom, which comes from tasks that are too simple or too familiar. Flow exists in the middle, in the channel between those two extremes, where the challenge is real but the skill is sufficient. When we are anxious, we grip tighter, we overthink, we second guess. We exhaust ourselves trying to control outcomes that are not in our control. And ironically, that gripping is precisely what destroys the flow. Athletes call it choking. Psychologists call it performance anxiety. Taoism calls it swimming against the current. Think about the river metaphor that runs through Taoist thinking. Life is a river. It already has a current. It already has direction, force, and intelligence of its own. Most of us spend enormous energy swimming against that current, trying to impose our own direction, trying to make the river go where we want it to go. And we exhaust ourselves doing it. The Taoist alternative is not to drown. It is not to float passively and go wherever the river takes you. It is to navigate, to read the current, to work with the water instead of against it. This requires a kind of intelligent surrender, knowing the difference between what you can shape and what you cannot, and having the wisdom to stop wasting energy on the latter. Consider how much of your daily mental energy goes toward things you cannot control. What other people think of you. What has already happened in the past. What might go wrong in the future. Other people's decisions, emotions, and reactions. The economy, the weather, luck, circumstance. We do not control our digestion, our immune system, our heartbeat, or who we fall in love with. The vast majority of reality operates completely beyond the reach of our conscious control, and yet the mind keeps insisting it can and must manage everything. This is not wisdom. This is exhaustion masquerading as responsibility. The practice of Wu Wei is not about giving up. It is about giving up the illusion of total control while focusing your energy with precision on what you can actually influence. It is about the quality of your presence rather than the quantity of your effort. Lao Tzu writes that the person who stands on tiptoe cannot stand firm for long. The person who takes the longest strides cannot walk far. There is a natural limit to forcing, and recognizing that limit is not defeat. It is maturity. This connects to a principle that psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset points toward, though she approaches it from a different angle. The obsession with results over process actually undermines performance. Athletes who focus on controlling outcomes tend to perform worse under pressure than those who focus purely on execution, on what is in front of them in this moment, right now. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome reached a similar conclusion through their concept of the dichotomy of control, separating what is within your power from what is not, and investing your energy only in the former. The Taoist and the Stoic converge here. Peace and power come not from controlling more, but from releasing attachment to what was never yours to control. But perhaps the deepest insight of Wu Wei is about the nature of interference itself. Lao Tzu observes that most problems solve themselves if we stop making them worse. Nature already knows what to do. A wound heals. A storm passes. A child learns to walk without being told how to move each muscle. A tree grows toward the light without consulting anyone. The intelligence embedded in natural processes is staggering. When we interfere unnecessarily, when we hover, force, manipulate, and micromanage, we disrupt processes that were already working. We add friction. We introduce error. We spend enormous energy on outcomes that would have arrived on their own with a fraction of the effort. This is why great leaders often describe the best leadership as invisible. When the work flows, when the team functions with ease, when results arrive naturally, and the people involved feel empowered, that is masterful Wu Wei leadership. Not the leader who does everything, but the leader who creates conditions so good that nothing needs to be forced. So how do you begin to practice this? How do you actually apply Wu Wei in daily life? Start by noticing where you are forcing. Where in your life are you exhausted not from genuine effort but from resistance? Where are you swimming against a current that has been trying to show you something? Where are you holding your breath and gripping tight instead of breathing and trusting the process? Then try practicing the art of strategic non-action, not laziness, not avoidance, but the conscious, intelligent choice to pause, observe, and let things develop before intervening. Give problems space to reveal themselves before rushing to solve them. Give relationships room to breathe before forcing conclusions. Give your creative work the permission to arrive naturally rather than being squeezed out by desperation. And most importantly, practice being present. Fully, completely, undividedly present with what is in front of you right now. Not performing, not strategizing, not monitoring yourself. Just here, just this, just now. Because Wu Wei is ultimately not a technique, it is a state of being. It is what happens when you trust yourself enough to stop interfering with yourself. When you trust life enough to stop fighting its current. When you discover that the effortless path is not the weak path, it is the path of water, soft enough to yield, powerful enough to move mountains, and wise enough to find the way through every obstacle. That is the philosophy of flow. That is the ancient teaching that 2,500 years later, neuroscience is still catching up to. The question is not whether you can live this way. The question is whether you are ready to stop swimming against the current long enough to find out what happens when you do.